The champagne glass slipped from my hand when my son looked me in the eyes and said nothing. Not a word. Not a single word to defend me. I stood there in front of 40 people, my cheeks burning, my heart somewhere on the floor between my feet, and I realized in that moment that everything I had sacrificed for the past 31 years meant absolutely nothing to the two people standing in front of me. I am 63 years old. I raised my son Ryan alone. His father, Gerald, passed from a sudden heart attack when Ryan was just 7 years old. And from that day forward, it was the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts at the elementary school where I taught 4th grade for 26 years. I drove a car with a broken air conditioner for 6 summers so Ryan could have new cleats for soccer. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day for 3 years so I could put money into his college fund. I did not date. I did not take vacations. I did not buy myself a single piece of jewelry after Gerald died. Every dollar that wasn't going to the mortgage or the electric bill went into one of two places, Ryan's future, and a small savings account I had labeled in my notebook as Someday. That Someday account had grown to $41,000 by the time Ryan told me he was going to propose to Jessica. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I did not dislike Jessica when I first met her. She was pretty and smart, finishing her MBA, and Ryan clearly loved her. She called me Carol instead of Mrs. Patterson, which I didn't love, but I told myself it was generational. I told myself I was being old-fashioned. I told myself a lot of things over the 2 years they dated. And every time I felt something uncomfortable in my stomach when she spoke to me, I swallowed it down and smiled. Her family, the Harmons, were a different story entirely. Her father, Douglas, was a commercial real estate developer in Charlotte, and her mother, Patricia, made sure you knew that within the first 4 minutes of any conversation, they wore their money loudly. Patricia always had a comment about my house. "It's so cozy," she'd say, which anyone over 50 knows is not a compliment. Douglas once asked me what I drove now, and when I told him I had a 2017 Honda Accord, he nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're trying not to react. When Ryan and Jessica got engaged, I cried happy tears. I genuinely did. I called my sister Donna in Phoenix, and we stayed on the phone for 2 hours. I pulled out the Someday account, and I told Ryan and Jessica that I wanted to contribute to the wedding. I said I had been saving for a long time, and I wanted to give them something meaningful. Jessica's eyes lit up in a way I had not seen before, and she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What followed was 8 months of what I can only describe as being slowly erased. It started small. Jessica would send me an email about a venue decision, and then, when I responded with a suggestion, she'd reply days later with, "We already booked it. But thanks." I was not asked about the flowers. I was not consulted about the menu, even though I had offered 3 times to help plan the rehearsal dinner, which is traditionally the responsibility of the... When I gently brought that up to Ryan, he laughed and said Jessica just had strong opinions, and I should let her enjoy the planning process. I let it go. I have always let things go. My therapist once told me that I let things go so often I had made a career of it. I was, however, consistently asked for money. The venue deposit was $6,200. Ryan called me on a Tuesday night and said they'd found the perfect place, but needed to put the deposit down by Friday or lose it. I transferred the money the next morning. The catering prepayment was $3,100. The photographer required half up front, $2,800. I paid for the florist consultation, the cake tasting deposit, the alterations on Jessica's dress when her original seamstress backed out 2 months before the wedding. Each time, I received a brief thank you text from Ryan. Once, just once, Jessica texted me directly. It said, "You're the best," and I saved it on my phone like it was something precious. By February, I had contributed just over $22,000 to this wedding. The Harmons had contributed a rehearsal dinner venue they owned themselves, which cost them nothing out of pocket, and a set of monogrammed towels from their Pottery Barn registry. I told myself it didn't matter. Ryan was my son. I would have given him my last dollar. That part was true, and I stand by it. What I did not know then, and what I know now, with the kind of clarity you only get after someone tears the blindfold off your face, was that I was not giving to Ryan. I was being used by people who had decided I was useful. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday evening in March. The Harmon's event space was beautiful exposed brick, Edison bulbs, long wooden tables. Patricia had hired a caterer and a bartender and had arranged for small centerpieces of white roses at every table. I wore a navy dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, and I had my hair done that morning for the first time in months. Donna flew in from Phoenix to be with me. She sat beside me at the table and kept refilling my water glass, and at one point leaned over and whispered, "You look beautiful, Carol," and I felt genuinely happy. The speeches started after dinner. Douglas stood up and gave a long toast about Jessica, about her accomplishments, about the values they had raised her with, about the Harmon family legacy. It was a good speech. I applauded. Ryan's best friend Marcus gave a funny toast that made everyone laugh. Then Patricia stood up. I want to tell you what she said exactly, because I have replayed it so many times in my mind that I have every word memorized. She said, "We are so grateful to everyone who made this celebration possible. Our family, our friends, our community. It takes a village, as they say." She paused. "We know the circumstances on Ryan's side have been another pause," and she smiled the way a person smiles when they know exactly how much damage a word can do modest. "And we appreciate that everyone contributed what they could." The table went quiet. I felt Donna's hand find mine under the table. Patricia continued, raising her glass. "But tonight is not about what anyone could or couldn't provide. Tonight is about Jessica and Ryan, and the beautiful life the Harmon family is so proud to welcome them into." She sat down. People applauded. Someone at the far end of the table laughed at something unrelated, and I sat there with my napkin in my lap and a smile locked onto my face like a mask I had been wearing for 8 months, and I looked at my son. Ryan was looking at his plate. I waited. I waited for him to say something, to stand up and correct the record, to acknowledge, even in the most polite way possible, that his mother had contributed $22,000 to this wedding, that his mother had raised him alone, that his mother was sitting 12 feet away from Patricia Harmon and deserved better than to be called modest circumstances in front of 40 people. He picked up his fork and cut into his chicken. Donna squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I excused myself to the restroom. I walked down the hallway past the coat check, and I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, and I looked at myself for a long time. The navy dress, the hair I'd had done that morning, 63 years old, retired now, living on a teacher's pension and the savings I had spent decades building, and I had just been dismissed in public by a woman who had never worked a day in her adult life and whose husband had handed her everything. I walked back to the table. I finished my wine. I said goodnight to Ryan and Jessica. Ryan hugged me and said, "Thanks for coming, Mom. See you tomorrow," as if I were a guest, as if I were a neighbor who had stopped by. Jessica kissed my cheek and said my dress was pretty. I thanked her. Donna and I drove home in silence for about 4 minutes. Then she said, "Carol, you know what you need to do." And I said, "I know," and I meant it. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and my reading glasses and a cup of tea that went cold. And I wrote down every payment I had made, every transfer, every check, every Venmo. I opened my bank app and I looked at the records, $22,460, plus the $1,100 I had already set aside for the envelope. I planned to give Ryan the morning of the wedding another check, drawn from the someday account, for $10,000, a down payment contribution, a gift I had been planning since he was in high school. I folded that check in half and set it on the counter. Then I opened my email. The florist was a woman named Gwendolyn who ran a small shop in Dilworth. I had met her twice. She was warm and professional, and I liked her. I emailed her at 1:14 inches the morning, and I said that due to unforeseen family circumstances, I needed to discuss the floral arrangements for the following day. I asked her to call me first thing in the morning. The photographer was a young man named Tyler. I had his cell number because I had been the one to coordinate the contract. I sent him a text. I said the same thing, unforeseen circumstances, please call me at 8. I called the venue's event coordinator at 8:01. Her name was Sandra, and she answered on the second ring, which I respected. I explained that I had questions about the financial arrangements on file, and I asked her to confirm whose name was listed on the payment records. She told me it was mine. Every single one. Ryan and Jessica had put the deposits in my name. I had been so focused on writing the checks that I had not thought carefully enough about what that meant legally. It meant I was the client. Gwendolyn called at 8:15. I told her I needed to cancel the floral order. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, very gently, "Are you sure?" I said yes. She said the deposit was non-refundable, but she would not charge me the remaining balance. I thanked her, and I meant it. Tyler called at 8:40. He was less gracious about it. He had blocked out the entire day, he said. He had turned down another booking. I would still owe him the full fee. I told him I understood and that I would pay the cancellation fee. I did not argue. I did not explain. I simply said I would handle it and I would mail him a check by Monday. Sandra at the venue called me back at 9. She said that under the contract terms, the full venue balance was due regardless of cancellation at this stage. I said I understood. I would not be paying the remaining balance. The deposit I had already paid was forfeit. That was fine. By 9:30, I had made 6 calls. The catering company, the florist, the photographer, the venue, the string quartet Jessica had insisted on for the cocktail hour, which I had quietly paid for 6 weeks ago without being asked. Just because I wanted the day to be beautiful, and the wedding cake bakery in Plaza Midwood, whose owner I had driven to personally to sign the contract. By 9:30, my son's wedding was effectively dismantled. My phone rang at 10:04. It was Ryan. I answered on the third ring. He said, "Mom, what did you do?" It was not a question. It was the voice of a man who had just received a phone call from a florist, or a photographer, or a catering manager, and was calling me in the hope that there had been some mistake. I said, "Good morning, Ryan." He said, "Mom, people are calling Jessica. The photographer just called her. The florist called. What is going on?" I said, "I've canceled the services I contracted and paid for. I've notified each vendor. I've fences I know. I've contracted in the mating. Any fees for late cancellation are my responsibility and I'll handle them." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Why would you do this? The wedding is today." "It's today, Mom." I said, "I know what day it is." He said, "I don't understand. Is this because of last night? Because of what Patricia said?" I said, "Ryan, I've been supporting this wedding for 8 months. I've paid for almost everything. And last night, I sat at a table while your future mother-in-law called my entire life modest circumstances in front of 40 people. And you sat 12 feet away from me, and you said nothing, not a word. You didn't correct her. You didn't thank me. You didn't stand up for me. You just ate your chicken." He didn't say anything. I said, "I love you. I have always loved you. I have given you everything I had for 31 years, and I would do it again without hesitation. But I will not be invisible anymore. I will not have my sacrifices used and then dismissed. I am your mother, Ryan, not your bank account." He said, "Mom, please. Jessica is devastated. Her parents are furious. Can we fix this? I'll talk to Patricia." I said, "Patricia doesn't owe me an apology. You do." And then I said something I had been holding in my chest like a stone for a very long time. I said, "When your father died and you were 7 years old, I made a promise to myself that I would give you a good life. I kept that promise every single day for 24 years. I worked summers. I tutored on weekends. I didn't take a single real vacation until you graduated college. I did all of that because I love you and because I believed you would carry that love forward with dignity. Last night I found out that I was wrong about one of those things." The line was quiet for so long I thought he had hung up. Then he said very quietly, "Mom." Just that. Just my name. In a voice I hadn't heard since he was small, I said, "I've put the $10,000 check back in my account. I'll keep it there. When you're ready to have a real conversation, call me." I hung up. I sat down at the kitchen table. Donna was across from me. She had made fresh coffee at some point during the calls, and she slid a mug toward me without a word. Outside the kitchen window, the dogwood tree in my backyard was blooming. Gerald had planted that tree the spring before he died, and every March when it bloomed, I thought of him. I thought of him that morning, too. I thought about what he would have said watching his son sit silently through that dinner. Gerald was not a man who sat silently. I had not told Ryan the second part. I hadn't planned to tell him until later, when the dust settled, but there was a second part, and it was something I had done quietly, without announcement, 6 months earlier. When I first started feeling uneasy about the direction things were heading, I had opened a trust, not for Ryan, for my future grandchildren. I had moved $15,000 from the Someday account into a custodial trust managed by my financial advisor, Margaret. Yes, Margaret, the kind of woman you want managing your trust. And I had designated it specifically for educational expenses, for any grandchildren I might one day have. Ryan and Jessica could not touch it. It was not a wedding gift. It was not a gesture. It was a decision made by a woman who had learned the hard way that the people you love most are not always the best custodians of what you've built. My financial advisor had raised an eyebrow when I asked her to set it up. She said, "Carol, this is a significant move. Are you sure?" I told her I had never been more sure of anything since the day I decided to raise my son alone. Ryan called back that afternoon. He did not call with Jessica or with the Harmons. He called alone, and I could tell from his voice that he had been crying. He said he was sorry. He said he had been weak, and he knew it, and he had no excuse. He said he had called Patricia and told her what she had said was wrong, and that she owed me an apology, and that if she didn't give me one, Jessica and he would not be attending the Harmons' anniversary party in June. He said Jessica was upset with him, which was fair, and that they were going to have a hard conversation about what had been happening. He said, "I've been letting her family make me feel like I had something to be ashamed of, like where we came from was less than, and I took it out on you by just disappearing, by not standing up. Mom, I'm sorry. I am so sorry." I listened to all of it. I let him speak until he was finished. Then I said, "Ryan, I forgave you before you called. That's what mothers do. But forgiving you and going back to the way things were are two different things. Things are going to be different now. I am going to need you to be my son, not just someone who calls me on Mother's Day." He said, I know that. We talked for almost 2 hours. He told me things I hadn't known. That Jessica had made comments to him about my house, about my car, about my clothes. That her mother had suggested to Ryan more than once that he should be embarrassed that his mother couldn't contribute more. That Ryan had never pushed back on any of it, had absorbed it, had somehow started to feel it himself, and that it had taken the sight of my face at that rehearsal dinner table, the navy dress, the careful hair, the smile that didn't reach my eyes, to shake something loose in him. He said, "You looked so small sitting there, Mom, and I did that to you." I said, "No, you let other people do it. There is a difference, and you need to understand that difference if you're going to do better." The wedding did not happen that day. They rescheduled for June, smaller, quieter, at the Botanical Garden, with 40 guests instead of 120. Patricia Harmon called me on a Wednesday in April. It was a short call. She said she had spoken poorly and without consideration, and she apologized. It was not a warm apology. It was the apology of a woman who had been told by her daughter that the relationship with her future mother-in-law needed to be repaired, but she made it, and I accepted it, and I told her I hoped we could find a way to be respectful of one another going forward. She said, "Of course." And then she paused and said, "Ryan tells me you've been very generous with the children." She meant the wedding costs. She was probing, I said. I try to support my family the best I can. She did not push further. I did not contribute a single dollar to the June wedding. Not out of spite. I want to be clear about that. Ryan and Jessica paid for it themselves. It was smaller and simpler, and honestly, watching them stand in the garden under a white canopy with the sunlight coming through the trees, I thought it was more beautiful than anything the first plan had promised. I wore the same navy dress. Donna stood beside me. At some point during the ceremony, she whispered, "Gerald would have been so proud of you." And I didn't cry right then, but I did later, in the car, quietly, with my hands folded in my lap. Because she was right, and because I was finally, at 63 years old, learning to be proud of myself too. That was 8 months ago. Ryan and I have dinner every Sunday. He comes alone sometimes with Jessica, and it is different now. Careful in some ways. More honest, in ways that matter more. Jessica is not the woman I would have chosen for my son, but she is his choice, and he loves her. And I have made peace with the parts of her I cannot change, and quietly declined to pretend the other parts don't exist. The $10,000 check is still in my account. Last month, Ryan mentioned, almost in passing, that they were thinking about buying a house in the next year or two. I said that was wonderful news. I did not mention the check. He did not ask. I will offer it when the time is right, not because I have forgotten what happened, and not because the debt has been repaid. I am not sure that kind of thing is ever fully repaid. I will offer it because it is what I choose to do. From a place I choose, on my own terms. That is the difference. That is what 63 years of living and working and grieving and loving and getting very little credit for any of it finally teaches you. No one gets to decide what your sacrifice is worth except you. No one gets to put a number on what you've given, or label it modest or sufficient or not quite enough. And when someone tries, even someone you love, even someone you made from nothing and raised into a full human being, you are allowed to close your hand. You are allowed to say, "Not like this." You are allowed to pick up the phone. And I want to tell every woman listening to me right now, especially those of you who are my age, who have been pouring yourselves into other people's lives for so long that you have forgotten what your own life was supposed to feel like. I want you to hear this clearly. Being a mother is not the same as being invisible. Loving your children is not the same as having no limits. And the moment you realize the difference is not a failure. It is not a betrayal of everything you were raised to believe about sacrifice and family and keeping the peace. It is the beginning. It is the moment you finally start keeping the peace with yourself. I closed the Someday account last month. It's empty now, redirected, reorganized, set aside in places where it will do the most good in the ways I decide. I opened a new account. I haven't labeled it yet. I'm thinking about what to call it. Something that doesn't sound like waiting. Something that sounds like now.